Welcome back to this second session of the Svemin Environmental Conference. I hope you had a nice leg stretch or shoulder rolling during the break, because now we're all ready to head into biodiversity. Thank you very much for answering the poll that we asked you to go into the Menti page to answer on biodiversity in the previous session. So, Magnus, do we have a result? Yeah. So the question that we asked you guys was, according to a major international 2019 report, how many species are threatened with extinction? And the most of you answered 1 million. And I'd like to go directly over to our first speaker, Alison Perigo from Gothenburg University. So please, is this correct?
Yes, this is correct. According to the EPAS Summary for Policymakers of the Global Assessment, in 2019, they have estimated that 1 million species are threatened with extinction.
Okay, so yeah, we have a very well-studied audience at this time. So please, Alison, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Emma. I will just go ahead and play my PowerPoint here. So, yes, hi. Nice to be with you guys this morning. And it's really nice to see that you have an entire section on biodiversity, which is, needless to say, my absolute favorite topic to talk about. Not only because it's got fun things like pandas, but also because it is one of the most important crises that we are currently facing. So I think that everyone should know a bit more about what biodiversity is. So in the next few minutes, I am going to be taking you through a crash course on what biodiversity is and what the threats are to it right now. Yes. So biodiversity is a word that I think we hear a lot, and it can be a bit unclear what it actually is. But in reality, it's actually very simple. Biodiversity is the diversity of life at different levels: genetic diversity, species diversity, and ecosystem diversity. So it's all the different things that we consider nature in a lot of ways, but at different levels. It's not only the species. So the most zoomed out level of biodiversity is ecosystem diversity. And in ecosystems, we can see in these pictures, you have different ecosystems here that maybe look, if you don't look too closely, they look quite similar, right? So you've got plants, there's green, there's the sky, there's some clouds. But even though all three of these ecosystems are looking quite similar, they're very, very different. Because they have different organisms that are working in them, that are working together to have this whole, this whole function in a larger sense. So an ecosystem is really the sum of its parts. That takes us down to species diversity. And species are maybe the level of biodiversity that we think about the most, because it's easy for us to grasp. Species are these entities that can actually be defined in a lot of different ways. But in general, there are these units that we can recognize as distinct things. There are estimated to be around 9 million species currently on Earth. That's quite a bit. And even that is a number that we're unsure about. So there's estimates that range anywhere from about 3 million to 100 million different species. The paper that said that there's about 9 million, I think, is done in a very scientifically sound way. So while it's still an estimate, I think it's a pretty good one. And it's that number that the EPAS, Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, was drawing their number of 1 million species at risk. And then we get down to genetic diversity, and that's the diversity within a species. And genetic diversity is extremely important because that's what gives species resilience when bad things happen. So if you have something like, for instance, a warming climate, there are going to be individuals that are more or less able to cope with these new situations. And that ability to cope comes down to genetic diversity. Genetic diversity is also important because it's this diversity that can give us resilience, for instance, in our food. If you have more different types of things, then our food security is going to go up. And it's also a lot of unexploited genetic diversity out there as well. There's a lot left to be discovered, and we don't have our cure for cancer yet. We don't have so many things that nature may hold the potential for. What is biodiversity good for? Everything, I would say. And you can really value it in two different ways. You can either say that nature and biodiversity is important for its own sake, or you can think about it in the sense of what it does for us. And that's very important to us as humans. We like to know what something's good for. What's the point of it? Well, biodiversity is essential for our life. If we get a one-way ticket off of Earth, we're not going to survive very long without all the things that biodiversity provides us. In addition to giving us our food, clothing, medicine, and housing, it gives us pollination for free, nutrient cycling, soil fertility, climate regulation, air and water pollution control, disease regulation, erosion prevention, recreation and tourism is quite a big one, and many more things on top of this. So nature is giving us free of charge some really impressive services that help us have the quality of life that we do. So what is sustainability in biodiversity? This is what it all comes down to, right? We're talking about sustainability and how do we use it? Well, to use biodiversity in a sustainable manner means to use natural resources at a rate that Earth can renew them. It's a way to ensure that we meet the needs of both present and future generations. And this is important because we're talking about renewal, and renewal happens on different levels with biodiversity. You can have populations that get larger or smaller, but you can also have evolution going on, which is on a much longer time scale. And this comes from the CBD, and I'm really looking forward to Bianca's talk next. And I hope she'll get into a bit more about, I'm sure she'll get into a bit more about what the CBD is doing with biodiversity, as well as this global biodiversity outlook that just came out about a week ago. So no matter which way we look at it, biodiversity is currently threatened, and on a massive scale. Here are some headlines. This is the one that everyone seems to have seen, which is good news that you're aware of this. Last spring, IPBES came out with this headline that 1 million species are at risk of extinction. Additionally, the WWF came out a couple weeks ago with the Living Planet report, which they put out every 2 years. And that showed a massive 2/3 decline in many organism groups over the last 50 years. The Global Biodiversity Outlook as well showed that we failed to meet any of the Aichi targets, which were set in 2010. 6 of them were partially met. And then finally, just about a week ago, Kew Gardens in the UK put out the State of the World's Plants and Fungi report, which showed that 40% of the world's plants are at risk of extinction. And they also pinpointed a lot of the potential and for both plants and fungi and reasons that we do need to keep this diversity. To go a little bit further into the Living Planet Index, we can look by region. It actually varies quite a bit. And this is the population sizes of mammals, birds, fish, amphibians, and reptiles. And they've dropped an average of 68% since 1970. So that's in many of our lifetimes. We've seen a absolutely heartbreaking decrease in the number of, in the populations of these organisms. You can see the biggest impact in the last 50 years has been in South America. We can feel a little bit smug in Europe that we've only lost a quarter of ours, But a lot of that is also based on the fact that it is only 50 years back, and we have been very effectively altering our landscape for much longer than that. So all put together, the population drops lead to the risk of species extinction, and that's where we get this 1 million species number. But in addition to the very stark warning that 1 million species are threatened with extinction, the EPAS report also came out with information about what it is that's driving biodiversity loss. And this is extremely important because it gives us a roadmap for understanding what the problem is and where we can fix it. So if you look at in the middle there, the direct drivers, you have 3 different categories: terrestrial, freshwater, and marine. And you can see that the drivers of biodiversity loss are listed in order there. The biggest driver of biodiversity loss is changes in land and sea use. After that is direct exploitation of species. And following on that is climate change, which for most systems is the 3rd biggest driver of biodiversity loss. And I think this is extremely important to keep in mind when we're talking about sustainability, that biodiversity and climate change are not the same thing. Climate change drives biodiversity loss, and biodiversity loss drives climate change, but they're not interchangeable words. And something that's good for biodiversity might not necessarily be good for climate change, and vice versa. But there are solutions that are good for both. So that's the good news. We just need to keep in mind that these are two different things that can be addressed together if we are thoughtful about how we do that. And this, the habitat degradation is no huge surprise. This was a figure that came out already in 2018, in the 2018 version of the WWF Living Planet report. And it showed, habitat degradation is a problem, exploitation, especially in the oceans. And then we have these other issues that are also quite important in the drivers of biodiversity loss. And we can see this in, for instance, these aerial photos from Brazil, where you can see that deforestation is happening at a very impressive rate. And even more so, we have the Pantanal, a wetland region in Brazil, the largest tropical wetland in the world, that's currently today, 22% on fire. So this is something that, as a biologist, I think more in evolutionary timescales, but this is happening in a day-to-day timescale, which is both terrifying and good because it means that there is something that we can do about it in a very short time frame. And if we look as well, those reports were primarily focusing on animals. It's a similar issue when we look at plants. This is also from the State of the World's Plants and Fungi. And it shows the various drivers, and we see energy production and mining is there at 5.4% of the risk for plant extinction. So there are many different factors that all play their part. But it's not without hope. This report came out alongside the WWF Living Planet report, or not alongside, but the same day. And this is a graphic illustration of the main findings in the report that show in terrestrial systems, we're looking at a massive decrease. But if we go about business as usual, it's bad news. If we increase conservation alone, so-so. But what we really need to be looking at is more sustainable production and more sustainable consumption. So it needs to be a step back, looking at what we can do as far as production and consumption. So conservation efforts haven't gone without success stories. And this one also came out recently. Up to 48 species have been saved from extinction, thanks to conservation efforts. But this should be our last ditch effort. This is the backup plan. The first thing we need to do is look at our production and consumption. So with that, I'd like to leave you with these words from Sandra Diaz et al. She was one of the chairs of the global assessment from EPAS, that at all levels, we must strive for transformative change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. Thank you. the title of your presentation was Pandas and Pantanal. I mean, both pandas and Pantanal are quite far away from us here in Sweden. Would you say it's more important to support the global WWF than acting locally here to create an increased biodiversity?
I can't say as far as which one, I mean, in an either or sense, that's a little bit difficult to give you, this is going to count for this much and this is going to count for that much. But I think that it's very important to remember that we in Sweden live in a global society. None of us lives our life outside of the global system. And what we do in Sweden has a massive impact on places like the Pantanal through what we're eating, through what we're wearing, what we're buying, and things like, even in the mining industry, you're going to have, there are going to be products that you're bringing in and they're not coming from Sweden. So we can't think that just because we live in Sweden, we're only affecting Sweden. Mm. So it's very important to keep a global perspective when it comes to biodiversity.
Mm. Yeah. Why would you say it's still that the general public is quite uninformed or unaware of the importance of biodiversity?
It's hard to say. I think people have a general idea about biodiversity, but as populations move to cities, we lose contact with nature, and we lose a lot of the tradition that is associated with that. So I would suspect that it has a bit to do with that. But I also think that right now we're in an era of bad news, and it's a bit hard to disconnect biodiversity from climate change, from many of the other issues that we're facing today, plastic pollution, chemicals. So I think that in that sense, it can be a bit overwhelming. Mm. But I don't think it's a lack of interest. I think people are getting more and more interested, which is good. We just need to make sure that the information is there for everyone who wants to know about it and everyone who needs to know about it.
Mm. Thank you very much, Alison. You're coming back for the panel discussion. And thank you very much for interesting and well-presented talk. Thank you. Biodiversity is very often hands-on. It's a ground level type of thing. And but now we are moving from the ground level up to the UN level of things. As we know, the year 2020 was named the superyear of biodiversity, with a new strategic plan for the Convention on Biological Diversity to be launched in Kunming in China right now, actually, if it hadn't been for the pandemic. But the meeting, the COP15 on UN Convention on Biological Diversity, has now been postponed. Our next speaker, Bianca Brazil, is working for the UN, or rather UNEP, currently as a program manager for business engagement within the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, where she coordinates the global partnership for business and biodiversity. And she will tell us more about this. Bianca, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity. And thank you, Alison, for setting the stage with very valuable information. Can you see my screen? Good. So I just want to share a little bit about the convention itself, just to give you some background. So the Convention on Biological Diversity was established in 1992 and entered into force in 1993. Today we have 196 parties, counting with the EU, of course. And the pillars, the main objectives of the convention, if you will, are conservation of biological diversity, sustainable use of natural resources, and access and benefit sharing of benefits arising from biodiversity. So every 10 years, the convention launches the strategic plan, what would be the strategic plan for the next decade. The last one was launched during the COP10 in Nagoya. Launched also the Aichi biodiversity targets, which was a set of targets that, as Alison rightly pointed out, through the recent report that we launched on the 15th of September, it became very clear that unfortunately most of the targets will not be met at all. And that's due to a number of reasons. Despite encouraging efforts and encouraging signs that there have been some progress into the biodiversity arena, such as, we had over 100 countries reporting on biodiversity, some encouraging results into some biodiversity projects for safeguarding some species and so forth, but it's still, we won't be able to meet all the targets, which is very unfortunate. So now, we have an even greater task ahead of us into crafting a new strategic plan that will then craft the pathway for biodiversity into the next decade. The process is underway because it's a global process, it's a political process, it's a party-led process. So what it means really is these 196 parties are coming together in different meetings and different occasions to discuss what would be the priorities, what would be the best way to approach on targets and goals and so forth. The process itself was a very broad process. One of the criticisms that we received for the last strategic plan was that there was some lack in engagement and involvement with other stakeholders, not only parties, because as you know, and as Alison rightly pointed out, biodiversity affects all of us. So even though this is a party-led process, it was identified, it was very important to involve other stakeholders into the whole discussion to make sure that we have a framework that it's for everyone and it's understood, accepted by everyone. And then we also have everyone's engaged into trying to achieve what would be the goals and targets set out for the next decade. So the current post-2020 framework is underway. We've had a few meetings already to discuss where the parties came out with a number of comments, inputs, and etc. We also had a comprehensive batch of consultations. So in 2019, we had several consultations on many aspects: oceans, gender, sustainable use of biodiversity and so forth. And they were mostly presential. So we had some regional meetings. We had the meeting of the technical and scientific body. We had the meeting of the parties for specifically discussing the post-2020. And of course, in 2020, we had a few, early in the year, a few presential meetings, but now everything's gone pretty much online. But as it stands now, the vision, the Global Biodiversity Framework has a vision. The vision is set out for 2050. So it says that by 2050, biodiversity is valued, conserved, restored, and wisely used. But for you to achieve the vision, the 2050 vision, you need to establish a milestone before that. So we know we are on track, or we can reassess and then redirect. So we established also a mission, the Mission 2030, which is take urgent action. We need to have a sense of urgency because we're losing species, we're losing habitats. And, if we keep on going the way that we're going, it won't be possible for us to safeguard or to bend this curve that's going down. As it stands today, we have 4 goals, 20 targets, and a set of indicators in a monitoring framework to ensure that we'll be able to track progress or not, and then have actions in place to make sure that we will do so by 2030. So we have a number of enabling conditions and means of implementation. And through the means of implementation, we understood from a very early stage that means of implementation would mean mainstreaming biodiversity into the decision-making process. So one of the ways that we're approaching this in terms of non-state actors is through the long-term approach for mainstreaming, what we are calling the LTAM. So an informal advisory group was established with 30 members, 15 of which are party members, and 15 are experts from various expertises, but not mainly, but we have strong representation from business associations and business representatives. Within the long-term approach, which will be supporting the overall framework for biodiversity, we also have 5 goals and 15 targets and success indicators that range from sustainable consumption and production to greening value chains. There's a number of elements there that are very much related to business and business operations. Within this work and all the discussion that was established through these members, 3 strategy areas were identified where it became very clear that we need to work with governments, mainstreaming biodiversity into policies and decision making, integrating biodiversity into business models, operations, and practices, including the financial sector, because of course, financial sector is a huge enabler for all the activities that we're setting out to do. And mainstreaming biodiversity across society. So that would include health, education, and of course, bringing all the knowledge and all the information, communicating the values of nature across society. So as consumers, we have better information, where we make better choices when we have this information at hand. So the role of business and finance sectors into the overall picture, we want to make sure that we invite business and finance sector to play a fundamental role alongside governments and civil society for the implementation of the post-2020. And how can businesses do that? Well, basically integrating values of biodiversity into the decision-making process across all the portfolios and across all operations that they have. The greening of supply chains will be very, very relevant, not only because of raw materials and because of the operations and how it touches upon different countries and different regions, but also because through the supply chain, that's where we can trickle down to small and medium companies as well. So in that sense, you will be able to not only engage with big companies or bigger companies, but also trickle down to the small and mediums, which will be very, very important if we are to succeed in that attempt. Increasing funding for biodiversity and protection and sustainable use. So many companies and organizations today have some sort of work that they're doing either for the protection of biodiversity directly or to review their processes and turn them into a more sustainable one. So we want to make sure that these funding resources, they are directed to things that are actually beneficial for biodiversity and not detrimental to biodiversity. And we are also asking businesses and financial companies to measure and report on impacts that they have. So at least through these 4 main activities, main pillars, can we say that we're going to achieve some success in terms of turning operations and turning businesses into a different path, changing business as usual to a more sustainable version of what it can be. So how do we do the engagement at the CBD level? So we have a business engagement program that I'm overseeing at the moment. We are working primarily with national and regional initiatives through the Global Partnership for Business and Biodiversity. This is a network of networks that was established as the result of a COP10 decision. Today we have 21, going 22. I'm glad to have here Tove from EcoGain because the Swedish Business and Biodiversity platform will become our newest members. We're hoping by early next month. So we will have then 22 national and regional established initiatives. And what this network does basically is information sharing, best practices, tools and mechanisms, help with metrics, studies, publications. So we have an online library, but we also share these materials and these documents with our extended network on a publication that we launch every 2 or 3 months. We liaise with business associations, with big businesses coalitions, and this is a very momentous time. We are seeing more now than ever, we've seen before, businesses coming together to call for ambitious policies from governments, to bring together many commitments that they're making for the next decade. So it's a very, very positive time, and I can see clearly that the interest is raising. Businesses are taking steps to take a leading role into the discussion, and that's pretty much one of the things that we mostly need right now. So we also try to liaise with NGOs, academia, other governments to try and reinforce the need for sustainable practices for businesses across the board at national and regional levels. We promote webinars, regional workshops. If we don't promote them, we support them, developing communications materials, events, etc. And we are now looking into streams of work that we could carry out for sectors specifically, or thematic. This is to do with what is being discussed at the long-term strategic approach on mainstreaming level, at the global biodiversity framework level. And we hope that by the end of this year or early next year, when we'll have all the discussions at the technical and scientific level, we'll be able to identify what are the main priorities that we have to work with business sector and finance sector, and be able to establish a work plan that will address all of those. We also now have a finance engagement program. So we are working with development banks, private banks, insurance companies, associations, with the UNEP-FI initiative. There's a newly launched task force on nature-related financial disclosures, and many other players. So we also want to ensure that biodiversity is at the heart of the decision-making process, following successful example that we could see in the climate sphere. So what are the entry points for businesses, you'd ask? Along with the consultation, various topics that we had in post-2020 were readily available for private sector representatives on sustainable use of biodiversity, access and benefit sharing. We have the mainstreaming discussion, oceans, resource mobilization. So all these discussions included private sector representation. We have a platform for harnessing commitments for biodiversity. Today we have something around 176 commitments. A small portion of this, I have to say, is from businesses, but we are ramping up and we're seeing that all these are bubbling up. We just had last week the summit on biodiversity, and many businesses stepped forward and developed their, or at least disseminated their commitments for biodiversity. Some countries did so too. Over 76 countries have come forward with specific plans for biodiversity. So we are now getting in touch with all these players to make sure that we have them all into the platform. We have the formal process of CBD, so preparatory meetings, that the private sector is also welcome to attend as observers, but they can also take the floor and address any issues that they might feel they can. Through the Global Partnership for Business and Biodiversity, through the national and regional initiatives. So in countries where they have national and regional initiatives established, we can put them in touch with businesses that are willing to take different actions.
Bianca,
Yes.
This is Stockholm calling. We're running out of time, and do you think you could wrap up and we can come back to you later?
I think I've only got one more slide. So through the global partnership and through events that we organize. So for next year, we have the COP15. It was supposed to take place in October, but unfortunately we weren't able to do that due to the pandemic. But during the COP, we have the Business and Biodiversity Forum, we have a Technology and Innovation Expo, we have a SIPA Fair, and a Business and Nature Hub, which means there's plenty of opportunities for businesses to get engaged in the discussion. We just had the UN Biodiversity Summit, which was at the margins of the UN General Assembly. The UN World Conservation Congress will also address and have an event dedicated to CEOs and business representatives. And I think we'll be hearing more from Lars about the European Business and Nature Summit that will take place later this year. So this is an overall picture of how we can connect things, how businesses can have a role can have no, how businesses have a role, and all the entry points where it can interact with the discussions that are at hand. I thank you very much for the opportunity, and I apologize for taking more time than I should have.
Thank you very much, Bianca. Thank you. And thank you for getting up very early in the morning, or actually middle of the night, to give this presentation. You're with us from Montreal, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll talk more to you during the panel discussion at the end of the session.
Perfect,
Rightly pointed out our next speaker, Bianca. So moving away from the UN level of things, across the Atlantic, we find the European Commission and we find the EU Business and Biodiversity Platform. And coordinating this platform is Lars Müller, policy officer at the DG Environment at the Commission. Please, the floor is yours, Lars.
Yes, thank you for this opportunity to give a bit of an insight in some aspects of the EU Business and Biodiversity Platform, respectively the biodiversity strategy that has been adopted in May. I hope everybody is able to see the slides now, because I have to do this, that you are clicking them forward from on your side, so I cannot really see what are you seeing. But I hope you see the opening slides, which has already quite an important statement. That is the main message I would like to get across in this, that our whole economy is depending to a certain extent on nature. And we have heard some aspects what the problem is already. We have heard where entry points are, what companies are doing, and I would like to go a little bit also in the why and how. Next slide, please. The whole effort of the EU Business Biodiversity Strategy is part of the European Green Deal, which is the European growth strategy that is meant to reform and transform the European economy in many, many aspects. And you see on the slides that nature, biodiversity is one key part of many areas where we are moving ahead by transforming the European economy in many aspects. So I cannot go into many of these aspects rather than on the biodiversity strategy. Next, please. To explain a little bit our paradigm, our philosophy, and also the philosophy of our community in the EU Business Biodiversity Network, I would like to point to this picture here, which is actually drafted by a Swede, Johan Rockström, came up with this way of describing the different aspects of sustainability. You see on this picture there the various SDGs, but sorted in a very specific way. And that's another key message I would like to get across. We all learned at school that sustainability is about 3 pillars. So a vertical thing of economy, social aspects, and the environment. And we think this is a wrong picture, plain wrong. You need to turn it by 90 degrees. Sustainability is about layers. And the basis of this layer is nature, the biosphere. And those SDGs that are addressing the biosphere, you need to get right first. Otherwise, you will not be able to get sustainability right in the other dimensions, in the other layers. And the driving thinking behind the biodiversity strategy was from the outset that biosphere is the basis of sustainability, and a huge part, more than half of the global GDP is linked to nature. It's 40 trillion. That was a number that was developed by the World Economic Forum. And restoring biodiversity is also core part of the current situation where we need to restore and recover from the economy in the light of the pandemic. Next, please. Speaking about the World Economic Forum and touching on the why businesses should care. In the annual reports of the World Economic Forum pointing to the key risks for the global economy, it's the environmental issues that are in the upper right corner of this graph, on the left side here of this graph, that are the key environmental risks for the economy. We need to address these. Management and not only the sustainability departments, but rather the CEOs and CFOs need to have a good understanding on the environmental risks when they are running their businesses, if their companies should still be around over the next decades. Next, please. So, looking at the high level at the biodiversity strategy, it has 4 main chapters. Of course, we need to enhance the protection of nature. We have legislation there, the Natura 2000 legislation in the EU, that needs to be better implemented across the EU. It is also that we need to restore, because despite the existing legislation, also in the EU, the biodiversity is on the down path. We need to restore in many aspects, in many ecosystems, and for that, the biodiversity strategy calls for a comprehensive planning with a whole series of detailed targets. I have listed them in the backup slides. I will not go into detail for the sake of time here, but there will be also next year a legally binding EU-wide targets for which then member states will have to help to implement these, of course. So we are also going to suggest a new legal instrument to enable this restoration of nature, and therefore also have legally binding targets within the EU. Then on the global agenda, we just heard Bianca, my good friend from the Global Partnership, so I don't need to go into that part. But in terms of transformative change, of course, also the biodiversity strategy needs to contribute to transforming the European economy. And there I would like to go a little bit more into detail. Next, please. So in this chapter, we are touching on various aspects. We need to change the way how we steer the decision-making at the administrative or the public level, but also in the corporate world. We need to change also the way how financial flows are being steered. So there's a whole set of, in the sustainable finance strategy, we also need to have a new way of financing and investing in nature. Of course, knowledge and education play a key role, and the promotion of nature-based solutions which address at the same time the climate and the biodiversity challenge are important. And since most decisions are being taken by business, we need to engage with business. Next, please. This is a little bit of a glance of key initiatives that also are listed in the biodiversity strategy. So we will have a new initiative on changing due diligence rules, the duty of care for companies across the value chain. So sustainable corporate governance is one of the key initiatives. As I said, the sustainable finance strategy is a key element. So we will have a new sustainable finance strategy suggested early next year. We are already working on it. So the Sustainable Finance Strategy 2.0 or something like this, it will be called, to substantially contribute to protecting and restoring biodiversity and ecosystem, also via finance. Then there is legislation on disclosure rules for companies, the non-financial reporting directive in particular, which is currently under review. How can we strengthen this? The current directive is effective already and has good elements, but it's not implemented in a coherent and consistent way across the member states, and also needs to be enhanced with regard to environmental aspects such as biodiversity. This is currently happening. I mean, we are working on a suggestion in the Commission, which will hit the ground next year, maybe already this autumn. Then there's the taxonomy regulation, which is in place already, which is meant to define what is a sustainable investment, a sustainable economic activity for investors to invest in. This year, there will be delegated acts under this taxonomy regulation targeting and defining what this means for climate adaptation and climate mitigation. Next year, the other environmental aspects, including biodiversity, will follow with a second delegated act defining what means the sustainable investment in nature. A key element in this is something that was also mentioned in the Green Deal: do no significant harm. So every activity that is investing positively in climate also has to make sure that it's not doing significant harm on other environmental aspects. Otherwise, it cannot be called a sustainable investment. And then one element we are very much engaged in the biodiversity platform is integrating the value of nature into the decision-making. Natural capital accounting, we do this together with the Capitals Coalition and many other partners out there to develop bottom-up, in cooperation with companies, standards for measuring the environmental footprint of products and organizations. And there's also a way of doing this developed in the house, the product environmental footprinting methodology. Next, please. Next slide. A little bit of our platform. We are a sharing platform. We are working bottom-up. We are not inventing stuff, but rather listening to our partners and listen to what businesses bring to the table, share it, discuss it among peers. And we hope that we are already in this exponential growing phase 4, that we are getting more and more companies, that we are moving beyond the front runners, moving beyond the piloting companies that we have been working with in recent years, that we are now really moving into a mainstreaming phase, and also that we develop the good methodologies into some more harmonized, more aligned and standardized way of accounting for the relation with nature, with natural capital accounting. Next, please. What we have been doing within the platform is contributing to the biodiversity strategies. We have relaunched the platform. We have built new partnerships with organizations like Business for Nature, We Value Nature, the Capitals Coalition, UNEP, WCMC, and the Global Partnership, of course, and the World Business Council Sustainable Development. There's an important project meant to address the harmonization of natural capital accounting. Many companies are doing this already: Philips, Lafarge, Holcim, Novartis, BASF. I could list Kering, I could list a number of more, but they themselves found they should be comparable when doing this natural capital accounting for the relation with nature, and put this also into monetary values in order to inform CFOs and CEOs. This should be more comparable. They are working on a standardized way of doing so, and the project Transparent is connecting us. We are supporting their work. And then zooming into the green part of nature, the living part of natural capital, biodiversity itself. How can you measure your biodiversity footprint as a financial or as a company? There are a number of projects and methodologies already in the making over the recent years. They were popping up like mushrooms. But which is the best? Which is the most useful? In which situation? Are you addressing local operations? Are you addressing a supply chain? Are you addressing a specific product? You as a company have different application situations. And for all these methods exist, we are trying to analyze and assess and align this, and hope to have together with our partners, based on their experience, soon a kind of standardized way of doing this accounting for the biodiversity footprint of a company. Next. We have 2 reports produced on this already, and we are currently working on a third report. You can find them on our website. So it's really about the assessment of the types of different business applications covered by a tool. And so far we have been focusing on self-description of the tool developers. Now in the next phase, we want to base this very much on the experience also by piloting companies. So those of you who are working in a company and you want to test one of these tools, you are invited to join us and help us testing and finding out which of these tools are most useful for informing your decision making. Next, please.
Okay, Lars, this is Stockholm calling again. Sorry to say that
It's
time's
the last
up.
one. It's the last one, yeah. Next slide, please.
Okay.
So the key point is you need to move even beyond measuring your footprint. You should also value it, because the number of species and your impact on ecosystems, they need to be translated into a language that is understood by your CFO and by your CEO. You need to turn it also into values, monetized values, that they will understand how this relates to their otherwise produced revenues. Thank you.
Thank you, Lars. Thank you very much. And you will be joining us for the closing panel discussion as well. If you have any questions for Lars, please use the Menti platform that I've been saying repeatedly. So go to thementi.com and type in the conference number. It's 6839136. So 6839136. Thank you. Every year, after the Svemin Environmental Conference, we ask you participators to evaluate the event. And you are all very kind. Thank you very much. Some say the presentations are too brief, and some others say the presentations are too technical. So I guess we found a good middle way. Last year, many of you mentioned how much you appreciated the short breaks, led by our Svemin colleague, Moa Weile. So here she comes again. She's back on stage. Moa Weile, please.
Hello. Hi everybody. I would like you all to stand up because we need to move a little bit and stretch out those arms and legs. So please stand up. Place your feet shoulder width apart. Make sure the entire foot is on the ground. Okay, we're going to start with the upper body. So put your hands together in front of you. And we're going to start with a rotation, and this one is in the shoulder. So rotate with the shoulders, open up, keep your hips forward, hold it and come back. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. This is for everybody, so please stand up, do it, and really take care of your body and take care of the opportunity to move a little bit. We're going to do the same thing again. First on the one side, one side we started with. Hold it, keep looking over that shoulder and come back again, and we swap for the last time. Look over the shoulder and we come back. We're going to speed this up a little bit. Bend your arms and we rotate this time in the hips, and we're going to work continuously. So from one side to the other, and again from one side to the other. And we stop in the middle. Connect those hands. I would like you to arch your backs, push your shoulder blades apart. Hold it. And we raise those arms and push the ceiling away. So use those palms and push the ceiling away. At least imagine you're doing that. And grow yourself as tall as possible. All right, we shake them arms out a little bit. We're going to go on to the legs. So I want you to lift your knee. You choose which leg you start on. Keep that balance. And you straighten that leg. It's a little bit hard, a little bit challenging. Bend it again. And we straighten it again. All right, keep the balance still on that one leg. This time we're going to rotate and open up the hip. And come back to the middle. Oh, I'm focusing very hard. I can't even look in the camera any longer. And we swap leg. We do the other one. All right, lift that knee. That's slightly a little bit more than what is comfortable. And straighten it. Come back. Do the same thing again. And we're almost done here now. One last time. Come back and we rotate out. One more. We're almost done. and come back. Put the foot down, shake the legs out, shake the arms out, take a deep breath, and breathe out. Shh. All right, that was it. This is what you need to do. You need to get a little bit air in, get a little bit movement in, and I am done. Over to you, Emma.
Thank you, Moa. I hope you all followed her instructions. We did see you guys who are on Zoom, so we could actually see that some of you didn't do the follow the instructions. Anyway, I hope it's looking better among our viewers. Anyway, the Swedish mining and minerals industry is the first industry to develop a joint roadmap for increased biodiversity. Through voluntary initiatives, cooperation and increased knowledge, the industry aims to contribute to global environmental goals and at the same time strengthen the Swedish industry nationally and internationally. The project manager for the Svemin project Mining with Nature is Tove Hägglund from Ecogain. Please tell us more.
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to be here, and after this break I was happy to stretch my shoulders as well. I hope you can see my screen. I can't see you, but I will start. Yes, the Mining with Nature project, it's a Swedish mining and mineral industry's roadmap for biodiversity net gain. And I will give you a short introduction to this project, to the industry goal for 2030, and also for some key parts of the proposed roadmap to get there. But I will start by just give you this short background. As you have heard this morning, we need to transform our societies. We have an ecological and climate crisis. And as we heard this morning, metals and minerals are needed in this transformation. But at the same time, mineral extractive activities can also put pressure on the earth and biodiversity, as well in Sweden as in other places. And the Swedish mining and minerals industry has been working very hard for very many years to handle this risk, to minimize the impacts. And I think you will hear more about that tomorrow. But in recent years, the industry has also been working more and more, not only to prevent damage, but also to increase biodiversity in form of mining site and via biodiversity offsets. So there's a lot of experience in the sector when it comes to working with biodiversity issues. And the mining sector has also been working together through Svemin. And about a year ago, some representatives from the Svemin's working group Nature and me and a colleague from Ecogain, we were sitting together and talking about what is the next step. And then the idea was born to create this sector-specific roadmap for biodiversity to contribute to the Living in Harmony agenda. So this project was initiated last year. It is owned by Svemin and led by me, Tove Hägglund at Ecogain. The project partners in the working group are Svemin, Boliden, Cementa, LKAB, Nordkalk, and Zinkgruvan. And it's financed via the Swedish Mining Innovation and Svemin, Boliden, and LKAB. So the purpose of this project and this roadmap is to facilitate the industry's proactive work for biodiversity, and by doing so strengthen the industry both nationally and internationally. And the way to do this is by producing this roadmap for biodiversity with a clear goal and also concrete actions. And as Emma mentioned, this is a unique roadmap. In Sweden, we have 21 roadmaps for fossil-free competitiveness, but this is the first one for biodiversity. So, as we can see, the mining and minerals industry are frontrunners in this aspect. And I know that other trade organizations are also very interested in this initiative. And we started the project by analyzing trends and other initiatives around the world. And we sorted them at global, EU, and national level. And We also mapped several motives for the industry to work proactively with biodiversity. And based on this, we formulated a goal for 2030, which was adopted by Svemin's board in September this year. And it is as follows. The Swedish mining and minerals industry's target is by 2030 to contribute to a net gain in biodiversity in all regions where mining and mineral operations and prospecting take place. And this means that industry will be investing further in developing innovative solutions for achieving sustainable land use in harmony with nature. This goal raises a lot of questions, doesn't it? And we are honest that we don't have all the answers, but we have a lot of ideas. And I will present some of them to you here today. And one key part is to build and share knowledge. We have heard the previous speakers also talking about the importance to build and share knowledge in between us. And this is true also within different companies in the mining sectors, between companies in the sector, with other sectors in Sweden, with the international society, together with academia, NGOs, and governments. And one aspect that we have identified is the need to document and follow up actions that has been made to improve biodiversity. And for that, we need systems for documentation and platforms to share this knowledge between ourselves. And this brings us to the next part of which is innovation. And we have identified several aspects that needs innovation. And one of them is how to best improve biodiversity at different sites here in Sweden. Can we move plants? How to best restore different types of ecosystems? And there are a lot of work already going on within the mining and minerals industry. And I think perhaps that Josh will be telling you a bit about some of these later. And more has to follow. And we need to learn both nationally and internationally from each other so that we can put the resources where it is needed the most. And another part is what Lars also mentioned earlier, that we need to measure and value losses and gains of biodiversity, because otherwise we can't say that we have achieved this goal or how far we are from achieving it. And as Lars mentioned, there are a lot of projects already going on internationally, a huge interest in this, and a need to align all these different valuing tools. And there's also a newly started project here in Sweden, which are trying to seek ways to measure and value losses and gains in Swedish context, but aligned with the international measurement tools. And this is a project that's been started by 8 different companies as a corporation, and it from 4 different sectors. And the mining and minerals industry has been one of the driving forces to get this project running. And that brings us to the next part, which is cooperation. Because this challenge of biodiversity loss is a challenge for all society. And even though the mining industry can and will be a driving force in this, the industry should not be working in a vacuum, of course. And there's a strong need to work together both nationally and internationally. And there's also important that the industry is given the right frameworks to work proactively with biodiversity. And therefore we have identified some appeals for politicians, because it's apparent that the legislation and practice in Sweden is not really adapted to issues as biodiversity offsets. Because long-term management, access to land, those are questions that are really challenging today. So in the roadmap, we list several appeals to the governments and also politicians and inspecting authorities. But of course, the most important part is to create action. And we have identified several concrete proposals for actions, which we structure at different levels. We have the cross-industry level, where actions can be taken through Svemin, the corporate level, operational level, and also which issues should best be adopted by cooperation with others. And it's important to say that this roadmap will not be a binding document, but it will be a supporting tool for all different actors that want to start working with biodiversity issues. But one thing that I would like to highlight that we think is very important is for every organization to set their own specific goals for biodiversity and to appoint responsibilities and mandates to work with these questions. And when it comes to this project, the roadmap will be launched at Svemin's autumn meeting this year. So stay tuned, it will be interesting reading for you all. We will launch it in both Swedish and English. And then this project will be completed in December. But the most important part, as I said, is the implementation. Implementation of actions according to the proposals in the action plan. Because at the end of the day, it's out there in nature, on the ground and in the waters that we can create added values for biodiversity. Thank you.
Very much, Tove. And we will meet you again for the panel discussion. So I save my follow-up questions for later. And I sort of follow where you ended, that it's the action that are really, moving things forward. But roadmaps, convention, and agreements are necessary. But on the other hand, all those documents can be quite fluffy and hard to translate into reality. So therefore, we will now give you some good examples from real life. From Heidelberg Cement, we have Joshua Prentice. He will tell us more how they work.
That's it, Emma. Thank you so much. Josh Prentice is my name. I'm the Sustainability Manager at Heidelberg Cement Sweden. And a lot of the thanks for this presentation anyway have to go to my colleague who's actually worked at Boliden, Anders Forsgård. Anders is not only far more knowledgeable than what I am and better looking, so I don't really know how I ended up in this particular sits today, but I just wanted to begin first of all by thanking Svemin and the previous speakers. I couldn't actually have asked for a better preparation for my particular presentation. And also thank you as well to all of the technicians behind the scenes. You're kind of like Santa's elves. We don't see you, we don't see your magic, but without you, no one gets to have the fun that we have had today. I just wanted to start because I'm aware that obviously we have audience members, which is fantastic, from outside of Sweden. So I sort of just wanted to give a brief introduction of who Boliden and who Cementa are and where we're located. Boliden is one of Europe's leading companies in exploring, extracting and processing base metals and precious minerals. So the map on the left-hand side there shows where all of their mines are actually located. So they're located, the Tara mine, which I will be speaking about shortly, is located in Ireland. We also have a number of mines both in Sweden and also in Finland as well. And Cementa, who is the subsidiary of Heidelberg Cement, the German conglomerate, if you're aware of them, we actually have our two cement plants located in Skövde, which is around about in sort of the middle of Sweden there. And we also have our largest plant, the Slite plant, which is located on the island of Gotland. I'm going to speak a little bit more about both of those sites and which challenges and which opportunities they also provide in terms of biodiversity. But if we start with Boliden, a lot of this information, again, as I said, comes from Anders, which I'm extremely thankful for. You'll see that on the picture here now is the Tara mine, which is located in Ireland. And you'll actually notice on the mine site, well, the first thing I saw when I looked at this particular thing, and it's a point that Anders always emphasises as well, is particularly how green it is. He can actually work with an industrial site to improve biodiversity through what we would consider to be fairly simple actions. I think for people who are in the know, like a lot of the people who are participating today, it can be just through the creation of green areas, through hedges, through rows of trees, through other sort of fairly basic and simple measures. You can actually create a green mine, as Paul Lidden calls it, which is a way of improving biodiversity during the actual time that you're actually in operation and around the particular mine site itself. We also then move from, we have a mine which is in operation, to obviously former mine sites where actual mining operations have ceased. And it always is a matter of an after-use plan will be developed, and there's always the question now of, oh, okay, what are we going to do with these particular sites? And this is something that Boliden has a long history of and has worked quite comprehensively with in both different countries as well, both in Sweden and elsewhere as well, is making sure that after-use measures are designed in such a way that they maximise biodiversity. This is something that Boliden, as I said, has worked quite extensively with, and has influenced a lot of the work that's going on into obviously the roadmap that Tulva was speaking about previously, and also in regards to two other sites, which I'm going to speak briefly about on behalf of Boliden. One of those is the Kevitsa site, which is actually located in Finland. It seems quite strange that we're sort of hopping from country to country in these times of pandemics and quarantine. This might be the closest that we actually get for a fair while. But this is through how both good planning that specific species can actually be maintained in close connection to industrial areas, both during the time of mining operations and then also afterwards as well. And that there are, exactly as Tulva was talking about, the importance of following up, of actually measuring, of making sure that the measures that we're putting in place are actually giving the effect that we're hoping for, that Boliden is actually able to follow up and ensure that specific species are not only just surviving, but indeed thriving in their habitat. I'll speak just about one more. I'm quite conscious of the time, and I'm quite conscious of the fact that people are probably getting hungry for lunch as well. This is one of the largest mining sites in Sweden, which is the Aitik mine. And this is where Boliden has put in an extensive amount of work with regards to ecological compensation around the mine site and around in surrounding areas as well. There's also a comprehensive research and follow-up program, which has been commenced in conjunction with the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences as well. So this is something where, again, Boliden has worked with other experts in the field to make sure that the actions that they're taking in terms of ecological compensation are actually giving the effect that they so intend. And I know that Anders could speak for a long, long time about the work that's being done at the Aitik mine, but in the issue of time, I'll jump on further and speak about two projects that are fairly close to my particular heart in any case. I spoke about the Skövde plant in Sweden, which is located sort of in the centre of Sweden, if you will. For those of you who don't know about Skövde, it's a town of around about 30,000 people, and the cement plant is actually really close to the centre of the city. And there was one particular stream, the Hålstam stream, which was located on the western border of our limestone quarry. And when Cementa was about to submit an application for mining operations, to extend our mining operations there, we ran into an issue there with the fact that we would actually have to reroute the stream. This is something I'm looking at Tulva in my window here in Zoom. We've worked very closely with the experts from EcoGain, ecologists, hydrologists, and other experts to actually reroute this stream, to lead the stream around. And what you see today is the picture that there is today. So this was something that wasn't in existence a couple of years ago. And this is something through hard work and expertise that we've actually been able to create, and then also follow up annually through inventory of species to see that they're not just surviving, but also thriving as well. And the final example that I wanted to raise today is the work that we do at our Slite plant, which is located on the island of Gotland. This was something that actually came about we discovered that we have the largest population of this particular type of butterfly, the marsh fritillary, at quite close to 2 of our sites. We used to have a site further down in Sweden called Diegaham, and we've actually completed the largest inventory of this particular type of species in all of Europe. We actually discovered, we thought it was actually the case that the largest population was closer to Diegaham. Turned out it was actually in the Sluthe area there, where we have the Europe's largest population of this particular butterfly. And what we do with this knowledge in mind, and again, this was something that was completed with the expertise of Ecogain and other experts, is that we actually follow up with an annual inventory every year of the population. So we are able to see any fluctuations in the population size that we have there. That was the final slide that I wanted to show on this. I just wanted to make one final closing remark. It's a bit of a theme that's gone through from Alison's to Bianca's to Lars to Tilpa's presentations. And it's something that I always say internally, and I know that others should be in agreement with me. We often talk about from industry that we need long-term certainty when you make business decisions. I say biodiversity is the longest term business decision that you will make. It will have an effect tomorrow in terms of how we use our land, but it will still be having an impact in 100 years' time. That's just something that I just wanted to pass on in light of the earlier speakers as well. I'll hand it back now to you, Emma, in the studio in Stockholm.
Thank you very much, Josh. It's perfect. You're doing my job to sort of wrap things up, Josh. Thank you very much. I hope you can have all speakers on screen now, and all speakers joining us. Could I have that on my screen here in the studio too, so I can sort of see you all at the same time? Well, sort of. It doesn't now. It's almost there. Anyway, you all heard, I was obviously representing Svemin. I'd like to start by hearing your comments on the Svemin project, Mining with Nature, that Tove Hägglund was presenting. What are your thoughts on that? The four of you. Bianca, for example? Were you awake?
Oh, yeah. It's very encouraging to see the efforts that certain industries have been making over the past few years. And when I first came in contact with Ecogain, I was actually interviewed when they were finalizing the development of, I think, some stages of the project. So it was very interesting to see their perspective, coming from an industry background and then being able to understand what is needed in terms of policy making, so they could address that with local authorities. And I think that's very encouraging. And I think we need to see more of those. Because they do have certain knowledge in terms of the sector that they work with, but of course mining is very heavily dependent on biodiversity, so it comes from different perspectives. It comes from the dependability that they have on the environment, but also what can be done at the industry level.
So thank you, Bianca. Lars Müller from the Commission. What are your thoughts on such a practical project as Tove Hägglund was presenting?
I think this is absolutely vital that we see more of this practical help for individual operators in gravel pits or whatever things you are having there in the mining industry. But one thing I would like to touch upon, companies like Heidelberg Cement, one of our members, are having comprehensive biodiversity strategies already. So they are maybe the easier part of the whole sector. The problem is all those smaller and medium-sized companies. So if you develop those guides, those best practice activities that every operator of a mine could do, you, Svemin, need to make sure that this is trickling through the whole sector, so that all the medium and small operators are also applying this good practice guidance. That's something I learned also with cooperation with UETG here at the European level. So you, Svemin, could have a key role also in helping getting this mainstreamed as a new normal in the sector. Thank you.
Yeah, we do have, thank you, Lars, for pointing that out. It's an interesting, and it's a good point. But we do represent some 40 member companies, and but we do always try to reach out to those who are not members too, because we are representing in the eye of the general public the mining industry, and nevertheless they are members or not. So I fully agree. Before we head over to the questions from you guys in the audience, I would like to ask you, or I rephrased. I put it this way: that we've talked a lot about practical, creating facts on the ground, being hands-on, and so forth. But what really make a difference is the intention, or the the intention of world leaders. What would you say? World leaders such as Bolsonaro or Trump, what impact do they have on the work or understanding of biodiversity? What do you say? I go to Alison, for example.
I think that Lars and Bianca can perhaps comment a little bit more than myself on this, but I mean, we are in a stage where we have many world leaders who are not giving these environmental issues the attention that they need. When we see, for instance, Trump threatening to pull out of the Paris Accord, and that that the US has not signed on to this new, help me here, Bianca, what's the name of the agreement that was just agreed last week? Slipping my mind.
The leaders pledge for nature.
Yes, thank you. When we see leaders that are not taking these seriously, it's a very dangerous signal, especially when they are some of the countries that are having very, very large impacts, or in the case of Brazil, have some of the remaining resources.
Mm-hmm.
So it's dangerous.
What do you say, Bianca, in Montreal? What impact does it have?
We have many good examples that we need to focus on. Unfortunately, in terms of leadership, governments come and go. What is left is either the support that they have for biodiversity or the damage that they do. And the only thing that concerns everyone is the fact that the damage takes decades to be overcome. So that's very worrisome. We're just hoping that, there is a lot of positive movement coming from European Union, actually, to try and stimulate the government in Brazil to be more responsible, to be more sustainable, to protect a little bit more of the forest. And so we're hoping that all these movements from the other positive examples will have a bearing on what comes next.
Okay. Diplomatic answer. Okay, I'll go over to my colleague Linus Ljungström and head over to the questions from the audience.
Yep. For the record, I also did the workout with Mua, but I was off camera. All right, so I have a question from a viewer here, and it's directed to Alison. And how much of the global biodiversity is found in the marine environment / oceans? And how does this impact on what we need to do to stop the massive decline of biodiversity?
If we look species-wise, I'm pulling these numbers off the top of my head. I believe it's about 2.2 million species that we find in marine environments. And that compared to about, I want to say 6.9, if that adds up correctly, on land. So it's significantly more species on land than in marine environments. But we can't be looking at species alone. Obviously, we depend on marine environments quite a bit for our survival as well. And I think they often get neglected because we don't see them as easily until you stick your face in the water. It's something that you can kind of forget what's going on under there. So it's absolutely part of the puzzle, and it's something that we need to be thinking about in this whole Earth system. We can't say we only need to look at the tropics. We can't only look at boreal forests, and we can't only look at marine systems. We need to be looking at everything together. Even though the majority of biodiversity is found on land, the ocean does cover way more of the Earth than land does, and it is responsible for these processes that are essential for our survival and as well as for our economy.
All right, thank you very much. And we have one question here from a viewer, and it's directed to Bianca. The momentum for business that you mentioned, how do you make sure that all are included, not only the best performers?
I think we're watching so many organizations coming forth. Lars mentioned here we have a big coalition that was formed last year called Business for Nature. They managed to garner 500 plus big companies worldwide that I think amount to $4 trillion in revenue that are willing to step up and take action for biodiversity. There are also, at the national level, there's many countries that have been watching businesses take leadership in many discourses. I think since we mentioned Brazil, something very interesting happened when the fire started in the Amazon. Banks and businesses stepped up actually, and they sent letters to the government asking government to be more careful with the environments that were on fire at the time. And I think this had some bearing because some measures were put in place at the time. So businesses have that power, they have that voice, and I think now they're using it more and more for the good of the planet, which it's very, very encouraging. And I think, our role as the political process is to make sure there are entry points for them to contribute to the discussion, to be involved into the decision-making process, because they will be very, very instrumental for the implementation of whichever global biodiversity framework we have approved and adopted during COP.
Thank you. And finally, I think this one is directed at Tove, maybe Lars. On a project scale, for example, a single mine in Sweden, should the climate crisis or the biodiversity crisis be prioritized? The Habitats Directive often slows down permitting, even for critical raw materials.
Yeah, well, there is, if I may,
sure.
There is an interesting concept that is called temporary nature with regard to biodiversity. So you can operate a mine by allowing for the continuation of certain population, because an open mine always means that you are creating new habitats of a very special kind, open soil, open rocks, rock pools, and so on, that are creating new habitats. If you are aware of this, if you are operating this mine in awareness of these new habitats and new populations you are creating, there are many examples I know from Belgium and from Germany in particular, that you can operate a mine also by maintaining these, and in awareness that, okay, at a certain point in time, you will also operate in this place, but the population of your species is then living in another part which you do not touch during that phase in the same mine.
Thank you. I think I'm looking at the clock here, and I think I'm going over to you again, Emma.
Okay, yeah. I think we need to wrap this up. It's very soon time to go for lunch, a late lunch, or maybe Bianca, for you to have breakfast. So thank you all speakers and participants. But before we all head off for lunch, I have an announcement to make to all of you from the Swedish Mining Innovation. And that Swedish Mining Innovation is the formerly known as SIPSTRIM, the research hub. They have an open call right now. And the name of the call is Tackling Sustainability, Environmental and Climate Challenges in the Mining and Metals Industry. And this call is open until November 5th this year. So you can find out more information about this. It might be interesting for you. Please check it out. It's on www.swedishmininginnovation in one word and then .se. So I see you back here from the studio in Stockholm at 1:30, and we will talk about water management. at the third session, and you use the same link to reconnect after lunch. So now it's lunch break. Thank you.